I don't know what the title of this video is going to be. I titled it Animation, why I majored in it and why I don't do it anymore. But that's not accurate because I actually started animating again a couple weeks ago, so that's a lie. I wanted to make a video talking about my experience going, oh, I'm not even looking at the camera. I wanted to talk about my experience going to art school and what I got from that and where it has led me. I graduated art school in... Bro, when did I graduate? I graduated right at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. That was fun. But I've low-key been trying to repress the memory for a while, or I'm starting to recover from my college experience, at least the negatives of it. And I feel a little bit less bitter and like I can finally talk about the positives, or I think I could just talk about it a little bit more objectively now. I posted a TikTok a while ago talking about how I graduated.
I take the ball, I bounce it, I shoot, I miss it.
With a bachelor's in something that I don't necessarily want to do anymore. Many of the responses that I got from that TikTok mirrored my feelings towards my college experience. While it was nice to commiserate with other folks, one person stitched my video and their insight pretty much sums up my thought process behind coping with these feelings of inadequacy and lost time.
So I didn't go to an art school. I didn't go to Cal Arts. Every single project, except for the specifically assigned group ones, you did by yourself. You storyboarded, you directed, you edited, you did scripts, you did voice acting, you did your own music. And do I think that you should learn how to do those things? Absolutely. And yet other schools, it was highly encouraged. Have an entire team because you're supposed to be working with other people. I was so burned out. So many of my friends haven't done animation since they graduated.
I think it is. You are not, most likely not going to graduate and do what it is you got your degree in for the rest of your life. It's just not possible. Every 10 years we change as human beings. You may get into the field and you may find something else that you like that's going to lead you to do something else. It doesn't mean that your degree was a waste of time.
I graduated with a degree in animation, specifically experimental animation. I spent about 2 years in community college before I graduated from the university. And during those 2 years, I did my core classes and learned the fundamentals of drawing, design. I wanted to rack up as many credits as I could before I moved on to university, just to make tuition costs a bit cheaper. The last 2 years of my educational journey were spent learning the fundamentals of animation, 3D art, and visual effects. I had so many experiences that completely changed my perspective on art and my own capabilities. And I think that this is something that everyone hopes to get out of art school. That and learning how to become a successful artist who can make a living off of their work. I want to discuss why I chose to study animation, what it was like studying animation, and what aspects of my experience ultimately led me on a completely different path. At least I think. I'm still on the path. I don't know where the fuck I'm going. But first, let's get into some quick background on, me, my art, my personhood. I'm going to add chapters to the video so you can skip to whichever part you really want to hear. So I always knew that I wanted to be an artist. My first love was drawing and painting. When I say my first love, I feel like that sounds cheesy. Drawing and painting were my very first hobbies. Some of my earliest memories are of me drawing in my mom's Bible during church before the kids were called off to Sunday school. I'd be doodling on the blank pages of the Bible and then get in trouble when I got home. I also used to draw on the walls, like in pencil, so I wouldn't get caught as quick. It's the thing I've always loved doing the most. But I felt like my aspirations of being an artist were always met with a bit of disappointment. This never really made me feel too bad, I guess, early on. That was until people began suggesting alternative careers, as if being an artist was not good enough. Whenever someone asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? Somehow, some way, they would always end up answering the question for me. Doctor, lawyer, astronomer. No one said astronomer. I chose astronaut, but that was just to make people's minds go, they're not going to let broke people go to space. Eventually, I felt like I had to pursue a job title that would, I guess, earn the approval of my peers and the adults around me. Getting people's approval was very important to me at the time. Still kind of is in a way. Hate to admit it, but you know, people had such high hopes for my career. They often framed my success as their ticket out of poverty. It was a joke, obviously, but like it high-key wasn't a joke. If you're a child of immigrants or refugees, maybe you can relate. Some children are kind of born into a position where they are kind of the one who is supposed to lift the entire family out of poverty by being the first to graduate, first to get a high-paying job, first to get their own house, the first. Anyways, I haven't hit any of those. All I did was graduate, and I don't even know where my degree is. When I was in high school, I guess that's where most people really begin to, think about what they want to do with their life. But every high school kind of has like their thing that they're a little bit known for. My school was the nerd school. Everybody just got a lot of A's. I felt like the starving artist narrative was being echoed through every resource that I used to learn about job prospects as an artist. Someone always had to remind me of the starving artist whenever I talked about potential career plans. When I say everyone, I mean my peers, friends, and family. Luckily, I had a few people in my life who really did encourage me to pursue what I wanted. I still doubted myself a lot either way. And then there's also kind of a stigma in society. I don't know if I should call it a stigma against artists, but arts is always the first to be cut in anybody's budget. You already know what time it is. Artists are seen as disposable, but like we're always needed. Funny, but not funny haha. Funny weird. I always knew I would end up doing something creative. I just couldn't really picture myself doing one thing, and that was scary. More on that in the end. My art has always heavily been inspired by animated films and shows. Companies like Disney and Warner Brothers were like always on my top watch list. I also took heavy inspiration from Bratz, Winx Club, Lisa Frank art, My Scene, Barbie, the whole everything girl world. I was in it. I loved coloring books. I loved floral, bright color, beautiful, just complete maximalist overload. Like I loved that. It reflects in my work today, I think. I hope. Some other huge influences were American cartoons like Avatar: The Last Airbender. I spent a good year redrawing Avatar characters. One of my favorite pastimes in elementary school was watching the behind the scenes footage for animated shows and movies. But I used to watch the second disc of The Incredibles, like the deluxe DVD pack. Do I still have it? I think it's still in here. I still have the second disc. Yeah, I used to watch it religiously. Watching the behind the scenes footage from The Lion King. Nickelodeon used to do the shorts where they would have the artists who worked on whatever animated show they were talking about draw the characters while talking about, what it's like creating the show. And I was into that. Seeing the processes behind animated films, especially 2D animation, was just so magical to me at the time. There's so many moving parts that go into making a film. I was mesmerized. The more I watched animated shows and the more I really got into the behind the scenes footage of animation, the more it made sense for me to just pursue that as a career. I mean, I like to draw. These are moving drawings. I like to watch them. Sounds like a job. In fact, I could never really give a clear answer as to what I wanted to do as an artist. I just knew that I wanted to make things. I knew that I loved drawing and painting, and I wanted to find a job that would allow me to do that as much as I can without living on the streets like everyone said I would. And that's extreme. I'm not saying everyone said I was going to be on the street if I pursued my dream. It was just heavily insinuated in the way people responded to my dream, if that makes sense. And I kind of took that, and because I cared so much about everybody's approval, I took that and really formed that as the basis for what I should pursue, but I didn't know better. I felt like I had to attach my hobby to something that seemed more technical or just harder to get into. Basically, the more obscure it seemed to my mom and dad, the more big-brained it seemed in their eyes. It would make me seem more exceptional in the eyes of my family and peers. This dynamic is what informed my decision to major in animation. Sorry, a little bit more backstory. Again, I just wanted to be an artist in some way, shape, or form. I was also really inspired by books first, before animated film. You know, before the days of cable, before I was able to indulge myself in cartoons all day, all night, I was reading books. Illustrations and children's books is what pushed me or what motivated me to draw more. Those were my first references when I began drawing as like a 4-year-old. When thinking about what degree I wanted to go into, illustration was kind of like that shiny object on the side that I couldn't stop looking at. Specifically for one college that I really wanted to go to. I wanted to go there for illustration at first, just because I saw some of the student work and I saw the robust program that they had, and I was like, wow, that looks fun. But I also thought a lot about animation at the same time. Majoring in animation didn't mean that I wouldn't be able to do illustration. Illustration just eventually became my backup plan. I thought animation might have better job prospects. So the first college I applied to, I entered that college program for illustration. This was a university, by the way, a private university. So we're gonna call this school School A. I decided I could switch my major at School A if I really wanted to, but I wanted to go with like my gut, and my gut was telling me, girl, you need to get into that illustration program. So that's what I did. I got accepted into the university, but I was still going to go to community college for 2 years just to save money on total tuition costs. At the time, I was worried that illustration was not, it wasn't technical enough to be respected. And the type of illustration that I wanted to do, I didn't want to do medical illustration or technical illustrations or anything. I wanted to do storybooks. I wanted to do characters. I may have developed a complex in my own head just from my own thinking, but I wasn't aware of all the career avenues you could take as an illustrator. I kind of thought there was just book illustration, medical illustration, and then technical illustration. At the time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to settle on any of those. Definitely not technical illustration. I am not built for that. I was basically too busy thinking about what should I do? What would be the best option? What would make me look the best? What seems the most exceptional? I don't have better vocabulary, so I'm gonna keep using the term exceptional or respectable, maybe interchangeably. Oh, English is hard. I thought that animation was harder and therefore more respected, more of a high-level skill, I guess. A part of me felt self-conscious about wanting to be a colorful, whimsical illustrator. There was a ton of pressure to have your career figured out already, or at least have some semblance or have some idea of what you want to do with your life. This sentiment was also reinforced at home too. I'm sure many can relate. And I think that pressure ultimately led me to go into animation. I was also reconsidering my degree and reconsidering my school at the time because the tuition fees at School A were scaring me away. That was a lifetime's worth of debt that I had signed off to. I began looking for other schools to study at, and I eventually settled on a public university, and that is School B. I settled on this school because I feel like they had the largest art program out of all my options. They also had an animation program, and animation programs weren't as easy to come by, at least in the area that I live in. I live in the state of Florida. Yes, there are options for animation school, but like affordable options, very far and few between, like across the country. I spoke to a few advisors before making my final decision to settle on School B. When I spoke to these advisors, I emphasized that I wanted to get a chance to study and practice 2D animation. This one thing that I wanted would determine whether I go to the school or not. And I was reassured that I would be able to get a chance to study and practice and learn 2D animation. After hearing that, I just kind of sealed the deal. Now I'm going to talk about how these classes impacted my artistry and my trajectory in terms of my art career. I spent a lot of time weighing the pros and cons of public versus private school, but I think I'm going to talk about that in a different video. I'll talk about like the specific schools I was deciding between and, you know, what it was like touring these art schools. Now let's talk about the work. My degree program was experimental animation. Now, just for a brief explanation, experimental animation is a form of animation in which motion pictures have their own rhythm and movement, where it has no narration or specific structure in animated films. It's considered to be subjective and non-linear and deals with philosophic and spiritual concerns that the artists and filmmakers convey. Through this degree, I was able to explore different disciplines within animation and expand on the fundamentals of drawing, design, and illustration, and digital media. So it was a lot of things that we learned all at once, but they all kind of work together. So like I said earlier, I spent the first 2 years at community college doing my core classes and my fundamentals. I'm not gonna talk about the core classes because that shit was boring as fuck and they don't matter because something's gotta be done. I know you gotta take core classes, but like that really was truly a waste of my time. I did not need college algebra. I didn't take college algebra. What did I take? Statistics. I had to take a bunch of traditional art classes and digital media classes. First, I'm gonna talk about the lower level fundamental classes that I took, and then I'll move up into the higher level classes. I'll show you a bit of my old work as well, just so you can see like the progression. In drawing classes, so I took AP drawing and that gave me a credit for drawing, so I got to skip one class in college. But I took about 3 different drawing classes, 2 in my community college. I took life drawing and drawing 2, and life drawing was fantastic. If you're looking to go into animation, you have to take life drawing. You gotta take it at least once. That class really challenged me, and it also humbled the shit out of me. It really pushed me to practice, and like repetition really is the key to getting good. Yeah, I excelled in class and I learned some really interesting techniques that helped me to this day. I also took another drawing class where we did a lot of still lives, a lot of charcoal work. In all my classes we worked in charcoal. My drawing 2 teacher was very interesting. This teacher was actually not too much of a fan of the university that I planned to transfer to, and so the way that they instructed my class, we'll get on that later, but it actually kind of hurt me a little bit in the long run. However, it was still a very enjoyable class. I was really challenged when it came to things outside of human figure. I struggled a lot with perspective, and proportions were very difficult, not just in humans, but like in objects too. This class really helped me become more confident tackling those things. In my design classes, I had to take 2 design classes, design 1 and 2. Design 1 was the very basics of 2D design. I barely remember too much about these classes, to be quite honest with you. I don't think my work in drawing 1 was like that memorable to me, except for a couple of pieces. There's one scintillation that I created that was, oh y'all, I spent a good 3 days, almost 3 days straight working on it. I did have to take a break after like 40 something hours. Yeah, it was a lot, but it came out really good and I still love it to this day. To this day. My design 1 teacher was really tough. They also taught my art history class, but they were very like upfront with their feedback. Like sometimes she would cut you deep and you just had to eat it. I felt like I was being pushed extra hard in class, maybe because I was trying extra hard in class too. I really put a lot of effort into everything that I did and it showed, and I really appreciate this professor for like pushing me. Design 2, I can't really say the same about the quality of teaching, but I had a great time. I had many different professors during this class, unfortunately, but I created some really cool work. I don't have any of them physically on me right now, but it was fun. It was a fun time. It feels freeing to work in 3D, not necessarily like 3D on the computer, but actually sculpting things, creating things, building things, putting things together. I love that aspect of my design classes. And then I took many digital media classes as well, and these classes gave me the fundamentals on film production, filming, editing, using the Adobe suite. We covered a lot of different things. Everything I learned about recording, I tried to do the lighting setup like how I learned in class, but I didn't have thousands of dollars worth of equipment like my school did, so this is the best I could do. I learned many techniques that were super useful for my animation courses, especially learning about film, learning about how to film, learning about, the principles of filming really help when it comes to creating animations later on. You learn the basics of lighting, camera angles, and storytelling. This was the first time I was able to really touch on all the Adobe products. Many of the skills that I picked up in these classes proved very, very handy for content creation. I didn't really take too many graphic design classes, but taking intro to graphic design was something that I had to do in community college. We were designing for print, UI, brand packages. Doing the branding project was really awesome too because it helped me formulate my brand. I used all those skills for the graphics that I make for my channel. I heavily considered changing my major to graphic design because it's just that useful. While I was taking these courses, I began taking on client work as a freelancer as well, just occasionally. During this time, I was doing small illustrations for people. I was also venturing out into the streaming and gaming world, and I began to gain clients through doing emotes for people. I started taking commissions for Twitch channel graphics. I applied the skills that I learned in class to all my content. I eventually earned my AA degree, and I was ready to transfer over to a university. The next thing for me to do was to pass the portfolio review that was required for me to enter the animation program. Okay, the transfer. The portfolio was reviewed before being accepted into the program. I was accepted into the school, but just not the program yet. In this portfolio review, they review your 2D design, your drawings, and your 3D design. On the day of the review, I hung up all my stuff. I was pretty confident because I put my foot into everything that I created. At least I thought I did. But I did not pass my portfolio review, which was so shocking to me. I was like, what? Me? No, not me. You made a mistake. I was hurt and I wanted to know why I got the grade that I got. So I spoke to one of the judges. They pointed out the things in my portfolio that were lacking and some of the things that they were looking for. Some of the things that they were looking for were really just biases towards people who took their traditional art classes at the university. There's a specific way that the school teaches drawing. You can tell immediately the difference between someone who studied at the school I went to and someone who has studied somewhere else or is self-taught, because there's a huge difference in the methodology and how to create a whole composition. There's a clear visual difference, and I think they were looking for not exactly the same technique or certain aspects of drawings being hit the same way. It's kind of disappointing to hear because I really did feel like there was a bias, but I did understand the critique that I got, at least when I spoke to the judge later on. They pointed out how I wasn't really filling up a full page with my drawings, how some of my drawings were just a bit timid, like the forms were really good, but it was just a bit timid, and I wasn't really mapping out the proportions in a way that was accurate or efficient. I eventually spoke to a bunch of other students who went to different schools or who transferred, and a lot of us had similar experiences, so I didn't feel too bad about that. It gave me a chance to take another drawing class, which I wanted to do anyways, and I had to take this drawing class because it was the drawing portion of my portfolio that I failed, which really threw me for a loop because I thought it was my strongest section. I had to take an intensive drawing class after the portfolio review in order for me to get into the program. This class and getting an A or, passing it was going to get me through the program. So I said, okay. Boy, when I tell you this is the hardest class I have ever taken. Artwork or doing art, especially doing traditional art, the way we were doing, that was hard physical work. That is physical labor. 6 to 8 week class, 5 days a week, 4 to 5 hours a day. But I've never seen my work improve that fast. I saw the quality of my work skyrocketing before my eyes. We focused on drawing blocks and planes for a while, but when it came to the human figure portion, I had that. I did so well and I had so much fun. I loved it. And it gave me a lot of confidence. The second half, or the last 2.5 years of my education, were very, very grueling altogether, but I was finally able to take the classes that are directly in line with the career that I thought I wanted at the time. I'm going to split up my core classes and animation related classes, just focusing on the core classes right now. Some of the required classes and subjects that I had to study were Intro to Animation, Intermediate Animation, Advanced Animation. I was exposed to 3D modeling, rigging, UVing, texturing, and motion graphics. Lots of things. Intro to Animation was a 2D only class. We learned the basics and the fundamentals of animation, spacing and timing, squash and stretch, all that shit. We learned that just in 2D first, which I really appreciated. Intermediate was 3D only. Advanced Animation gave us a chance to choose between 3D or 2D because we were just mainly working on our capstone projects. I was really grateful to be able to touch on so many different disciplines within the industry. I have a few takeaways from taking these courses. This is the time period where I learned that I was not too fond of 3D art. A little bit more on that in a bit. As I began to take my upper level classes, I started to realize that there wasn't as much opportunity to learn 2D animation, not as much as I initially thought. This wasn't made completely clear when I was speaking to the advisors when I first enrolled into the school, or even when I was first thinking about enrolling into the school. Most of the animation that I had to do, or at least most of the animation that I wanted to learn, I had to learn on my own, Googling, finding resources, also books. I knew that this program that I entered was 3D centered because I saw the catalog, but I also saw a lot of room for there to be, other classes filled in, and I thought that there was more opportunity to learn 2D art. My intro to animation class was taught by my favorite teacher of all time. The professor that I had was one of the best professors I ever had. They were not a 2D artist, but they were able to explain the fundamentals of animation and critique our work in a way that made it really easy to understand what he was saying. From how he was talking, I would have thought he was actually a 2D animator, but no, he wasn't. He isn't necessarily a 2D animator. This professor also created a space for us to air our grievances. When I say us, I mean students who wanted to pursue 2D animation. He gave us the space to really air out our grievances in a way that I don't think any other professor would have. This professor really did his best to advocate for us, and I really appreciate that. I found that I had to do a lot of animation practice and studying on my own instead of in the classroom. Now, while Intro to Animation gave me a really awesome foundation, I just expected more in-depth instruction on various techniques in 2D animation, especially with certain programs like Toon Boom. If I came here to study 2D animation and I'm finding that I have to do most of my studying on my own when I specifically paid to go to school to get my hand held, kind of made me feel some type of way. Intermediate is where things went downhill. I don't like 3D art, period. I love 3D art. I just don't like to do it like that. I can model when I need to. I can texture when I need to. Hell, I might rig something for you. I'll think about it. When it comes to animating objects in 3D, I can't. I was so focused on 2D animation at the time. I was really determined to put all my effort into my 2D animation capstone, but we had to learn 3D and I had to completely shift my focus the next semester. I began to resent my 3D classes at this time too. I knew I was very interested in 2D, and that's all my mind could focus on at the time. But another class that was pretty important in my animation studies was motion graphics. A lot of typography. If I still have them saved, I will show them. Different exercises surrounding typography, graphic design, in motion. I'm so bad at describing this. I had a terrible time in this class. It wasn't fun. It was a class where we used After Effects almost exclusively. During this time, I began to stream and get into gaming. I put more effort into the graphics I created for my Twitch channel than I did my school projects. I still passed. I did fine. I had some beef with a specific teacher. Good chunk of my studies I just didn't have as much patience for, and I wasn't really that interested in. So I diverted my focus into things that I was interested in at the time, and that was content creation and streaming and just making stuff for the sake of making it. However, my elective classes at this time served as a breath of fresh air from these intensive animation courses. Some of my electives were compositing, visual effects, illustration, intermediate painting, and narrative sculpture. The sculpting class, the narrative sculpture class that I took was so much fun. Physical sculpture was just so freeing for me. And I also was able to create almost whatever I wanted, really. We got to create whatever we wanted. We would have small prompts, but we could center our projects on whatever. And I chose to create a lot of projects that were centered on my original character that I was developing for my animation, for my capstone project or my thesis. I really got to flesh out my character in that class, and even some of the environments that I ended up animating later on. Being able to work with my character and my story in 3D with my hands, I don't know, it kind of just made it easier to approach the settings and the character designs later on when I began to buckle down on my thesis. Because there were no expectations. It made it easier for me to approach 3D modeling, even though I still it took a while for my head to wrap around how to sculpt something on a computer. Things were just not clicking. For my intermediate painting class, I wouldn't say I necessarily took this class to further my animation studies. I took it because I just love painting and I wanted to get better at it. Boy, did I improve. I struggled a little bit in the beginning, but just like with my drawing classes, as soon as we moved on to human figure, things just clicked. It was a really transformative experience, and I had a really good group of classmates too. We had very constructive critiques, and painting for me is something that is just so comforting. It's very cathartic for me. I'm so embarrassed. Like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to tell the story of how I cried during one of my art critiques. Not because the critiques were bad. I cried because my painting was fucking fantastic, and I cringe. I cringe thinking about it to this day. Moving on. The first half was shaky because I wasn't interested in some of the subjects that we were painting. Like, we were doing a lot of still lifes at first. If I'm bored with the subject, I'm not going to do it. I pushed myself through a lot of boring ass shit in high school, but in college, I just felt like I could not be bothered. I also found it really hard to get over my intimidation. There was something about painting that it felt intimidating to me at the time. I was too boggled down on trying to make sure everything looked right instead of just being in the moment. The biggest critique that I have about this class, we did not see any models who were black, and this is the same for my drawing classes. All of my drawing classes, anytime we had live models, they were not black. That also has to do with, you know, the amount of people who are available, but I'm just like, I just find it hard to believe that in this big ass city that I live in, there is no people of color who could have modeled. Because when it comes to painting, I feel like skin tones in an intermediate class, skin tones should definitely be covered. Honestly, that's a beginner thing. Why is that not like a fundamental in all painting classes? I need schools to do better. But if you're an art professor and you teach painting, and if you're not doing a whole course on skin tones, you're dropping the ball. And if you're a professor who does not know how to teach skin tones, maybe you should go back to school too. Cause what? Anyways, I also took compositing and visual effects, which was really, really cool. And while I complained about having to do a lot of 3D work, I did not mind this class at all. It was mainly 3D as well, but effects and compositing doesn't just apply to 3D, it applies to 2D as well. I took this class with my favorite professor, and it was, again, heavy After Effects work. And I loved being able to work in After Effects again because it is a powerful tool, and it proved to be very useful when it came to creating my graphics for Twitch. Now, granted, my graphics that I created before weren't like the best, but I was so happy that I was able to navigate through After Effects the way I could. In this class, we also studied a lot of different films in order to see the evolution of visual effects in Hollywood, and we learned about practical effects, how CG is done today, and like some of the best and worst examples of CG. Being able to watch movies for homework and just have whole discussions about it in class, it was great. Even though Maya usually makes me cry upon launch, I did like an electricity effect for my end of semester project. And last but not least, my illustration class. So my illustration class was the class that I had the highest hopes for, but I ended up being like the most disappointed by. But I think that's because my expectations were a bit misplaced, and I think I might have just taken the wrong class. This was my maybe second to last semester. I was able to take an advanced illustration class. I was a bit disappointed. I passed this class with an A. Yeah, I understood every assignment, but I did not enjoy the subject matter. It was so boring, y'all. I was taught by someone who has a very, very extensive background in illustration, but they also started off like a really long time ago. And so the way that they were describing their work and, you know, how their time in the industry was interesting to hear, but it was also like, I kind of wish we got perspectives from people who were kind of have entered the industry in more modern times. I'm not trying to call this professor a dinosaur, but like, they had some years on them. There was a lot less instruction, but I mistakenly thought that we would be reviewing and learning more about the industry, but I think I should have taken more lower level classes. I think this was a class where people had already gone through the lower level classes, and a lot of folks were working on their capstones. This is the wrap up class. I was not confident using digital drawing programs at this time. I had gotten my iPad like a while back, and I used it for a lot of classes classes up until now, but I was still very uncomfortable drawing digitally. My art just could not be at the same level as it would have been on like a traditional canvas or newsprint paper. Just couldn't get the same quality or the same level of detail. I wanted to learn the ins and outs of illustration. I wanted to learn the ins and outs of the illustration industry, and I wanted to explore different career paths more in depth, and I wanted to do all that in one semester. Clearly, that didn't happen, and I think I might have been asking for too much. But those are still things that I felt like I was lacking in, but I think it just showed how badly I still wanted to be involved in illustration or study illustration. And that goes to show that I've always been on a set path, even though I thought I was on a different path. Illustration could just never escape me. What I wish I learned. I wish I learned about some business practices as a freelancer or as someone who gets an agent. I didn't even know that folks could get agents for work. Like, what? I didn't even know about that. I just didn't know about any of the business practices surrounding being an animator and being an artist. Didn't really learn anything about copywriting work, royalties, how protecting your art, what it's like pursuing freelance work, contracts. I just felt like the education was severely lacking, or at least in terms of like the business side of things. And I'm like, dude, just a week of this, just like a week or two, and we could have at least had the understanding that these are things that we can do. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe it's just in hindsight. I also just wish I learned more 2D animation, god damn it. I do wish I would have taken more illustration classes. I don't know if there was maybe like a narrative illustration class. And everything that I wanted, I only got crumbs of. Where I'm at right now, you know, I'm gonna expose myself a little bit. My animation skills have been lying dormant since I graduated. You know, that was kind of embarrassing to admit for a long time. I don't know if it was burnout. I don't know if I was just a bit too timid. I don't know if I just lost confidence in my skill. I think it might have been a combination of all of those things. Throughout my time in school, my focus kept getting pulled back to illustration and drawing. I no longer had the desire to be an animator. I lost the motivation to become an animator, and I also lost interest in the industry as a whole. I just lost interest in entering the entertainment industry as an animator. I was tired of forcing myself to build skills for things that I only kind of wanted to do. So I took a few steps back and I began improving my drawing skills, learning how to use Procreate and other drawing programs much better, and getting better at my use of color. I was slowly becoming better at illustrating scenes and characters, and I was getting better at making sure that my drawings were consistent. I eventually developed a style that felt very me. It took me a long ass time, but I think I finally have the consistency that I want. I'm always looking to improving it, but like I like the look that I get, and it feels very unique to me. A lot of the things that make me who I am, the things that I love, things that I identify with, that's all combined itself into the style that I have today. I feel like I'm still lost, to be honest with you. I've been trying to do freelancing, but it's been so hard. I've been wanting to make this video for a really long time. I figure it would be nice to look back at where I was before, because I'm feeling really down about where I am right now. I felt like I was consistently sabotaging myself because of my inability to really focus on one thing. When I think back, I feel like my education was a little bit all over the place in a way. But then again, I'm also someone who is just kind of all over the place. I realize that the decisions that I've made are just a part of my journey. I'm not necessarily lost, even though I feel lost. I've come a long way, and I still have a long way to go. I do not regret my decision to go to school anymore. I did at one point. No regrets. I got to dabble into all the things that I dreamt of doing, and I got to learn what I liked and what I didn't like. Some people entered art school knowing exactly what they wanted to do. I thought I entered art school knowing exactly what I wanted to do. That's why I was so frustrated when I wasn't able to focus on 2D animation, but there were other disciplines that I was obviously gravitating towards, but I didn't want to commit to because I could not let go of animation. I felt like I didn't want to flip-flop. I wanted to commit to something. I'll never know if it would have been better for me to actually change my degree. I don't know if I needed to go to school for it. It's contributed to the artist that I've become today. And I'm really proud of the work that I've created. I feel like I've come so far, but I've only moved like an inch. I came into college feeling a certain way, and I came out feeling the same. And it sent me in a really deep spiral in 2020. I was just not in a good mental state, and I really just resented college. I was angry about the time, money, and effort that I spent. I felt like I put in so much work and I had very little to show for it. I was able to get a job right after, actually before I graduated, I was able to snag a job doing art. I was actually doing animation, but more so like I was doing rigging, like a face rig. It was interesting, but I wasn't working in the industry that I really wanted to work in. My God, I am not made for corporate America. Kind of entering an industry that did not align with how I like to live, what I believe in, and it made me really question whether I made the right choices. All the choices that I made, I feel like were just steps in my journey. I'm not even gonna lie, I'm truly going through it. Being a freelancer is no joke, and some people hit it big. Some people hit it off real well when they go freelancing, and some people fall on their face a lot, and I feel like I cannot stop falling on my face. A part of me is wondering if I've sabotaged myself by not pursuing animation, by taking such a large gap. But I truly just didn't feel like I was ready for it. I just didn't feel like it was for me. I'm not necessarily sure where I'm going career-wise, but I know that improving my illustrations and really focusing on narrative work is something that is calling to me. The path ahead feels a little bit less foggy, and even though I'm still unsure and very scared, I'm even more confident in my abilities now. I know it'll take me somewhere eventually. I would love it to happen a bit faster because I have bills. Bills wait for no one. But yeah, that's the end of my video. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know this was a long one. If you want to see the uncut version of this, well, it's not completely uncut, but it's like the more raw version of this. It's up on my Coffee. I cut out a lot less. And if you want to see other bonus content, art updates, shop updates, because my shop is coming very, very soon. If you want me to talk a little bit more in depth about my art school experience, like where I went, how I chose my school, I don't know, anything else that's more specific, just let me know in the comments and I'll consider doing a video on that too. That's it for me. Yeah, all right. Peace out. I posted a TikTok. Help. My necklace is backwards. Occasionally as well. What the fuck? And I spoke. Sorry, that was a loud yawn. No, stop yawning. Who's playing their music that loud? Give me what I'm here for. Oh shit. I just woke up from a nap. Oh, the birds are chirping. No disrespect, but like, I'm shading you. And making. Oh, this is long as shit. We are B-rolling. It's not drugs, it's stress.